Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. Let's start the discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 11 important articles. Let's cover all of them in complete detail so that you don't have to go back and read the paper again. But before we start, I have a very exciting and special announcement for you. As we celebrate the festive season, the Diwali season, Unacademy is marking Utsav 2025, and all of you get a chance to win some attractive festive rewards. So, Unacademy is running a mega lottery. Those interested can register immediately by using the link provided in the description, and the winners will be declared tomorrow on the 16th of October. You just have to register for the lottery and you stand a chance to win iPhones, smart tabs, and many other attractive rewards. And if you're also looking to enroll for our online classes, this would be the perfect opportunity for you because as part of the Diwali season, Unacademy is offering its subscription at one of the lowest prices ever. You can now avail a 12-month subscription at just 17,999. So those interested, click on the link in the description and don't forget to use the code IAS English. And if you want the PDF of the class, please join our official Telegram channel. After the session ends, we will be sharing the PDF over here. So with this, let's get started and look at the first topic. On page number 10, the Hindu carries a detailed article on the concept of innovation, how innovation can drive economic growth and economic development. If you remember, yesterday we had a small discussion on this topic because this is related to the Nobel Prize, which was awarded in the field of economic sciences. On October 13th, the Nobel Prize for Economics has been announced. So, yesterday we saw who these Nobel laureates are, and we just understood the economic concept on which these economists have worked upon, for which their work has been recognized. So today we can have a detailed discussion on the theories and the concepts that were developed by these economists. They mainly focused on how research and innovation has driven economic growth throughout human history. So the article actually provides some very interesting insights. But I would like to take you beyond the article, provide some interesting arguments so that if there is a question on this topic in GS paper 3, or there could even be a essay topic related to this, you should be able to directly use those points in your mains answers. So let's start the discussion. Let's start with the basic facts. Let's repeat again as to who are the Nobel laureates who have been recognized with the economics prize. Joel Moquer from Netherlands, Philippe Aghion, a French economist, Peter Howitt, a Canadian economist. Now, this award, the Nobel Prize for Economics, is officially known as the Sveriges Riksbank Prize, which is given out by the Royal Academy of Swedish Sciences. So it is slightly different from the Nobel Prize, which is given for the other domains like physics, chemistry, medicine, etc., which is given out by the Alfred Nobel Committee based out of Oslo in Norway. Now, irrespective of that, this year's Nobel in economics, it has been divided between these three economists. Half the award has been given to Joel Moquer for his incredible research in bringing out the linkages between technological advancement, innovation, and how it has powered economic growth over centuries. The other half of the award is shared by the other two economists who built upon this theory and even developed a mathematical model to understand the concept of creative destruction. How innovation and research in science and technology can further human development and economic growth, And they came out with further analysis on the concept of creative destruction, which is an economic theory. So, this is what we will learn today. We will understand the concepts developed by Joel Mokyr, concepts such as useful knowledge, propositional knowledge, and prescriptive knowledge. We will talk about the theory of constructive destruction or creative destruction, which was further developed by these two economists. So let's break this down and look at the topic in complete detail. Now, if you look at human history and human evolution, for centuries, human growth and economic growth has largely remained stagnant. Since scientific discoveries were limited in the ancient and medieval times, of course, there were large and important breakthroughs from the great Indian civilization to the Chinese civilization, right? Since ancient times, there have been few scientific advancements, but they were not happening at a quick pace. And the technologies of that era were not easily scalable. Though humans had developed a basic understanding of the fundamentals of science, the practical application of that was very limited and restricted. So when you look at ancient medieval period, for hundreds of years, for centuries together, for millenniums together, human growth and economic development has been very limited. It has been largely stagnant. Look at the graph over here. How for thousands of years, hundreds of years, economic growth in general has remained stagnant with small spikes being seen here and there. But see what happens in the last 2 centuries. Let's take the last 200 years from 1800s till 2025. Look at the last 200 years. Look at the phenomenal economic growth that humanity has registered. Look at the exponential curve, how development has taken place in the last 2 centuries. So, what caused this sudden disruption? There must have been something which happened over here, somewhere in the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, which led to this phenomenal change in economic growth and development. The only answer for this is innovation. Development in science and technology, in research and development, the rapid scale at which innovation was happening, the kind of disruption that new discoveries and new products was causing in the markets is what triggered this massive exponential growth that you see in the last 200 years. Throughout human history, economic growth has been largely stagnant with limited growth. But all of a sudden, in just 200 years, there has been exponential growth. So this theory has been further explored in a lot of details and depth in the research that was conducted by Joel Moyer, who pioneered the concept of useful knowledge. This Dutch Jewish economist, he built upon the idea of useful knowledge and he identified two major subsets of useful knowledge. Useful knowledge is any knowledge which can be applied for useful applications, for useful purposes, mainly for economic activities. Now, useful knowledge is of two types. There are two subsets within it. We have propositional knowledge and we have prescriptive knowledge. So please make a note of these concepts. Propositional knowledge refers to the theory. It refers to understanding the basics of nature, understanding the physical laws and dimensions, the basic chemical composition and chemical reactions which are taking place in nature, understanding the biological processes, theorizing about it, developing the conceptual knowledge on the working of our environment, the working of the universe itself. This is what you mean by propositional knowledge. In simple words, this is the theory of science. For example, let's say the discovery related to gravitational laws, the basics of fundamentals of science across physics, chemistry, mathematics, and biology. The very basics which were proposed as theories, which were envisioned as theoretical concepts, they account for propositional knowledge. I'm sure all of you can tell me whether propositional knowledge will translate directly into application Absolutely no. In order to develop a useful application out of theory, you need practical prescription. You need the actual instructions. You need experiments to be carried out. So, for theory to be applied in practice, what you need is prescriptive knowledge, which only comes through further research experimentation. You need to produce reproducible results, which can be replicated across the world, irrespective of different conditions. You need to ensure uniformity with regard to the results, the outcomes of scientific experiments. So, for that, you need actual prescriptions. See, for example, Leonardo da Vinci during the Renaissance period, he had envisioned the idea of aerial flight. He had even drawn a sketch of a probable helicopter. So that was propositional knowledge, a theory. But would that alone help in building an actual functional helicopter? No. For that, you need prescriptive knowledge. You need researchers who could actually implement that theory in practice, develop different variants, test it out in the real world, and eventually create a functional helicopter. You see this in Indian civilization as well. Since ancient times, there has been a lot of scientific advancement in the Indian civilization where propositional knowledge was brought out. Then later, this was applied through prescriptive knowledge. Look at the advances Indian ancient researchers had made in the field of astronomy, in the field of medicine and physiology. These were indeed remarkable advances, but eventually it wouldn't translate to economic opportunities at scale. Now, this is the change that you see in the last 200 years. By 1600s, researchers around the world had a basic theoretical understanding of our physical environment. They had a grip on how the universe is functioning. They had a grip on the foundational laws of physics, chemistry, bio, and mathematics. The theory was in place by the 16th, 17th century. And then came the Industrial Revolution, primarily in Britain and across Europe. This theoretical knowledge was now applied into practice. And this is what powered your Industrial Revolution. Of course, the British and the Europeans, they had looted the wealth and raw materials from their colonies, from India and around the world. But how to utilize those raw materials? If they took cotton from India, how do they process that in a cotton mill? How do they mass produce this, turn that into fabric and garments and textiles? This practical aspect was cultivated in Britain and Europe, which powered the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, the 1800s. New technologies came up very quickly. Experimentation was being carried out across the world with new research, new funds into development and innovation, and there was a explosion in the practical application of science. It is this which led to the tremendous growth that you see from 1800s, 1900s onwards. Is that clear? So, Joel Moyer identified the prerequisites for sustained scientific development, economic growth through technological progress. He presented this through data, through evidence. Since ancient medieval times, there were few scientific breakthroughs, there were some practical applications, but it was not sustained economic growth. It would happen in some periods, in some regions of the world. But from 17th to 19th century, we saw the transition from theoretical knowledge to practical applications, and it was sustained continuously. It had a cascading domino effect, which led to the massive growth that we have seen in the global economy. So I hope now the concept of propositional knowledge and prescriptive knowledge is clear. This helps you understand what is useful knowledge according to Joel Moyer. Now, what is the policy implication of this? What can we learn from the research of Joel Moyer? How can we apply this in governance? What is the utilitarian purpose of this research? That is the end argument, right? How can it be useful in policy making today? What lessons can we draw from this? There are important economic lessons for any government. This tells you that adequate investments in research and development is necessary. It tells you that there is a need to focus on skill development. For example, the reason why Britain could leverage this opportunity in the 1800s was because Britain had enough number of skilled artisans, workers, engineers at the right time in the right place. Britain, the British Empire, had access to the human resource which was needed. The skilled talent and manpower was present in large numbers who could lay the foundation of the industrialization of Britain and Europe. So, for a country like India, this is a great lesson. Why you should focus on skill development, why you should promote vocational training, ensure that technical expertise is developed. It's not just enough to focus on core research and core theories. You need experts, artisans, engineers, workers who could actually bring that into application and turn that into economic progress. That is what Britain did. That is what every developed industrialized society has done. So the timing of this is very crucial. So these are some important policy lessons for any government, because prior to industrial revolution in Europe, researchers, physicians, mathematicians, chemists, they had a good scientific understanding. The theories had been developed. The propositional knowledge was already there. But this was turned into practice, into applications through the prescriptive knowledge that developed in the 1800s. And Britain and Europe, they had the manpower, the resources, the talent to make sure they utilize this to channel this into economic activities and turn this into economic growth and development. Now comes the concept of creative destruction. What is this concept of creative destruction? See, when science is advancing, new technologies are coming up, new goods, new products are being developed. Don't you think in every few years, in every few decades, old technology will get replaced by new technology? Correct? For example, there was an era where we were using separate calculators. Now, how many of us actually use the physical individual calculators? Today, calculators are integrated in every other computing device. There was a time when we were using floppy disks, CD-ROMs, DVD burners, whatnot. Today, I'm sure nobody touches these storage devices because today there is much better and easier storage devices that are available, from your USB pen drives to cloud storage. Old technology will always get replaced by new technology. This is the norm, meaning technology will get destroyed. There will be destruction, but this is creative destruction. There is something better which replaces the old. Now, don't you think there will be some resistance from the old industry, the old stakeholders who pioneered the development of that old technology? They will try to resist change. The society itself will try to resist the change. This is another important lesson that Scholl, Moyer, and the other economists developed. Society has to be ready to change. It has to adapt to changing technology. Governments will have to adapt. They have to invest in research and development and skilling. And as new technologies come up and they replace old technology, leading to creative destruction, there needs to be growing acceptance of new technology. That is when humanity will grow and thrive. That is when exponential economic growth, sustained economic growth can be delivered. Now, just again imagine the scenario when floppy disks were getting replaced by CD-ROMs, or audio cassettes, video cassettes were being replaced by new technologies in audio video entertainment. What if there was resistance from the tech industry, from the old industries, which had a vested interest to protect their profits? What if they lobbied with the government, preventing further research, preventing the emergence of new technology? So that would become a hindrance, a roadblock. So if the society becomes more accepting, if the industry becomes more accepting of creative destruction and government encourages creative destruction, that is when sustained growth can be promoted. So this is again a key lesson which has policy implications. Today, even traditional computing is getting replaced, right? Traditional social media will be eventually replaced. Your traditional banking will get replaced. The evolution of artificial intelligence will drive many old technologies out of business. Many companies, many industries will shut down. Many people might even lose their jobs for some time. But if you don't adapt and accept and embrace the new technology, if you don't embrace this creative destruction, you are going to halt the development of humanity. You are going to stop economic growth and progress. That is why governments have to proactively push for fresh innovation and push the society to change. They have to contain the vested interests, the old industries, the old technology, allow for new technology to replace old technology. Now, isn't this a great policy lesson for governments, for research institutions, for the academia, and for the private industry as well, and for the society at large? Now, coming to the other two economists, they further built on this concept of creative destruction and they developed a mathematical model to analyze the trend of creative destruction. Now, look at the infographic here. It's super interesting. Just see what has happened in the last 200 years. Every 50 years, approximately, old technology has been completely replaced by new technology. In the first wave of industrial revolution, when cotton mills, iron factories and steel factories were coming up in Britain and Europe, the essential technology was very basic, using water power through which iron textile industries were set up. And then came steam. Steam would transform industrial activity and transportation. Rail transportation was introduced. Steam engines drove innovation and improved mobility and transportation for workers, for moving goods and equipment. Steam basically transformed industrial activity and production, increasing the pace of production, leading to mass production. This very quickly got replaced by electricity, chemicals, and of course, the assembly line developed by Henry Ford and internal combustion engines. The emergence of automobiles, right? The emergence of different forms of transportation, the emergence of electricity driven industrial activity, and how assembly line production led to true mass production in Europe that was envisioned and engineered by Henry Ford. Then came the next wave with advancements in aviation, petrochemicals, with fossil fuels taking over, and advances in electronics as well, with new resistors, capacitors, and new semiconductor chips coming up. We witnessed a new era in aviation technology, space technology, defense, military hardware, leading to another wave where many old technologies got replaced. And then coming to the contemporary times, the development of computing, digital technologies, software, the new age media, including internet, social media. Look at the transformation they brought about. They disrupted every other old technology, disrupted every other sector. And today we have entered the next wave of disruption, driven by artificial intelligence, robotics, and renewable energy and clean technology. This eventually will replace the old. So, this is the norm of scientific advancement and economic growth and development. If governments and society can sustain this research and development and innovation, that is when economic growth will also be sustained. So, the other two economists, they basically developed a mathematical model to understand creative destruction. How exactly does it work? How this can offer lessons for investments in R&D. Now, let's take one scenario. Let's say new innovation is outpacing and replacing old technology. Now, don't you think the profits for old companies will stop? Like how companies which produced floppy disks, they were driven out of business within months when CDs arrived. The whole CD, DVD industry was driven out of business once pen drives arrived, right? Now, when the profits are reducing for the old companies, what incentive do they have to invest in research and development? Since companies know that they'll be replaced in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, or maybe even in sometimes in months, they will reduce investment in R&D. They won't invest much in R&D and innovation because they know the profits are limited for a short duration. That is the time for the government to subsidize R&D. Government should step in directly, encourage the industries, the companies, innovators, and the academia and private industry to invest by creating subsidies and incentives for research and development. Now, look at another scenario. Let's say there is a new innovation which has brought out a new radical product. Maybe one company is holding the patent over it, and this company will now monopolize its dominance. Let's say there is a pharmaceutical company which has developed a new breakthrough drug for treating cancer, which no other company has been able to do. Maybe no other company will be able to catch up. In such a scenario, if one company has a monopoly on the profits, that is a time when government should not subsidize R&D. Why? The private companies will do it on their own because there will be competition in the market to break that monopoly. Even if one company is holding that monopoly due to a new innovation, there will be other competitors who would be looking to invest in R&D. They don't need a push from the government. They don't need incentives. They don't need subsidies. The other competitors will do it on their own. This basic idea was developed further by these two economists, and they have created a mathematical model for this. This has direct policy implications for governments around the world, for the global economy itself. So I really hope you guys have understood this interesting concept. You can definitely anticipate a mains question based on this, or be prepared for an essay topic, or try to include this discussion in a related essay topic. Let's say there is an essay on industrial revolution or new technologies, critical emerging technologies. Don't you think you can include this debate, this argument in that essay? Correct? So look at this practice question. The 2025 Nobel Prize in Economics recognizes the link between innovation and economic growth. That is a statement which has been given. In this context, explain the difference between propositional knowledge and prescriptive knowledge and elaborate on the theory of creative destruction. What are the policy implications we can draw from these concepts? Basically, there are 4 parts in this question. Always read the question carefully. Understand the subparts in the question. First, there is a statement about the Nobel Prize in Economics, which recognizes the link between innovation and sustained economic growth. So your answer has to begin with an introduction that talks about the 2025 Nobel Prize in Economics, where you outline the concept for which the award was given. How innovation drives sustained economic growth. Maybe you can mention the names of these 3 economists, their pioneering work, just the basics without going into the details. So this can be your introduction. You can even point out how economic growth has stagnated throughout human history. But all of a sudden, in the last 200 years, there has been sudden explosive growth driven by innovation and technological development. So this was theorized by these economists, for which their work has been recognized with the Nobel Prize. So that has to be the introduction. Then in the body, you will address the other part of the question. You will talk about 3 important concepts. One is useful knowledge and propositional knowledge within it, and prescriptive knowledge within it. Explain this maybe with one example. How Jules Moyer pioneered the idea of useful knowledge, what is propositional and prescriptive knowledge, the theory and the practical application, and give one example to justify the argument. Next, coming to the third concept, which is creative destruction. Here you can beautifully illustrate how old technology will always get destroyed by new technology. What challenges does it create? Right? So that is something you'll bring out under the concept of creative destruction. And then you talk about the policy implications. What lessons can policymakers draw from this research? What can be applied into governance, into economic planning and policy making? So identify these lessons one by one. The focus on skilling, the importance of investments in R&D, right? When to incentivize R&D and when not to incentivize R&D. Bring out these 4 lessons and then conclude your answer. The conclusion can be futuristic, forward looking, right? You can point out that these lessons, if applied, it can translate into sustained growth and development in the coming decades, in the coming centuries as well, right? We need not see any stagnation in economic growth and human development because now we have the lessons, we have the experience. If we implement these policy changes, if we draw these lessons, we can sustain our growth and development for the coming decades, coming centuries as well. So that can be a forward-looking, optimistic conclusion. So this is how you build a structured answer which will satisfy the demand of the question. Please use this discussion to improve your answer writing skills. Now let's look at the next article. This article is related to the political dynamics of our neighboring country, Bangladesh. Bangladesh is going through a great political flux. Here we will talk about the internal political developments of Bangladesh. Again, some of you might think, how is this relevant for the exam? It is extremely relevant for the exam because Indian interests depend on the political developments in the focus countries, especially countries in our neighborhood. Bangladesh is a key neighbor of India. We share the longest land boundary with Bangladesh. Bangladesh is critical for the stability, security of Northeast India, to tackle organized crime, to tackle Northeast insurgency, to deal with the terror sanctuaries which are present, and also to overall stabilize the security situation in the Northeast region. So Bangladesh is a key partner for India, even for economic growth and trade and development. Bangladesh has been our largest trading partner in the South Asia region. We share multiple rivers with Bangladesh, almost 53, 54 transboundary rivers. We share common ecosystems like Sundarbans. So we have common connectivity projects as well. Our national waterways are interlinked. Our highway and rail networks are interconnected. Our seaports are interconnected. India has big investments in the infrastructure projects of Bangladesh. Here we are dealing with competition from China and a hostile threat from Pakistan as well. So no doubt, the political developments in Bangladesh will have direct implications for India. So understanding the politics of Bangladesh is very, very relevant. And let's quickly understand this. See, ever since Bangladesh was liberated from Pakistan with India's active assistance, 2 major political parties have evolved in Bangladesh. One is the Awami League, which goes back to 1949, founded right after independence, after the British left the Indian subcontinent. The Muslim League, which championed the partition of the subcontinent and created Pakistan under Muhammad Ali Jinnah. It had an internal division. Some of the Bengali Muslims and the Bengali community, which was part of the Muslim League, they split from the Muslim League under leaders like Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and the others to establish a new political entity in East Pakistan, which was the Awami League. So Awami League emerged from the Muslim League itself because their politics, their ideology differed from that of the Muslim League and the more radical extremist politics of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who would become the founding father of Bangladesh, the Bangabandhu, was one of the co-founders of this political party. So when Bangladesh was fighting for its liberation, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and his party Awami League, they were at the forefront of this fight. Mujibur Rahman would lead the Shanti Bahini, which was leading the political phase of the struggle to liberate the country from Pakistan's atrocities. And it received complete backing and support from India. India not only gave covert support to the armed Bengali resistance, that is Mukti Bahini, by supplying funds, arms, weapons, and military grade training through secret routes. We also gave political diplomatic support to Shanti Bahini, which was leading the political phase of the struggle. So right from Bangladesh's birth, Awami League has been the most important political organization, led by the then Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Eventually, Mujibur Rahman was assassinated in 1975 by disgruntled members of the Bangladeshi army who were still pro-Pakistan. So in Bangladeshi society and politics, there has always been a fundamental split, a fundamental divide. On one side, you have the Bengali nationalists who fought for the liberation of their country, who have always been pro India. They've always been grateful for India's contribution in the liberation of Bangladesh. So parties like Awami League, leaders like Sheikh Mujibur Rahman fall under this category. The Bengali nationalists who fought for the liberation against Pakistan, who are pro India in their approach and in their policies. The other branch of Bangladeshi society and politics is more inclined towards radical nationalism, radical religion based extremism. So you find right wing extremists, religious fundamentalists, and radical nationalists on the other side. After the assassination of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and almost his entire family was wiped out, a new leader emerged in Bangladesh, Zia-ur Rahman, a military officer under whom Bangladeshi army took over the rule of the country. And eventually, Zia-ur Rahman would establish a political party, the BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which has been the second most prominent political organization in Bangladesh. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party has always had pro-Pakistan, pro-Islamist inclination. A right-wing political outfit focusing on radical nationalism, a more extreme form of nationalism, focusing on religious conservatism as well, focusing on pro-Pakistan, pro-Islamist policies. And the BNP government has always been seen as anti-India in its approach. Now, coming to the recent times, 1990s, early 2000s, the Awami League saw a resurgence under the leadership of Sheikh Hasina, the daughter of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who grew up under India's protection. After Mujibur Rahman's family was wiped out, Sheikh Hasina and her sister, the only two survivors, they largely grew up under India's protection, India's care. And Sheikh Hasina would re-enter Bangladeshi politics in the 1990s, and she would rebuild the Awami League. So Sheikh Hasina, her leadership, her party, they have followed the footsteps of their father, the founding father of the nation, and they have been pro-India in their approach and in their policies. The other leader you see here in the image, Khalida Zia, the wife of Zia-ur Rahman. By the way, Zia-ur Rahman was also assassinated in 1981. So after Zia-ur Rahman's assassination, the BNP's leadership fell under the wife of Zia-ur Rahman, Khalida Zia, who has been leading the party for the last 20-30 years. BNP came to power on a couple of occasions. In 1991, in 2001 as well. So BNP has run the government at least for 2 full terms. And on both occasions, the BNP has been slightly anti-India, pro-Pakistan and pro-Islamist in its inclination. And during the BNP rule, there was another party, another organization, Jamaat-e-Islami, a notorious radical extremist outfit. See, the Jamaat, which primarily comprises of young radical Islamist students, it has branches around the world. There is a branch of Jamaat in Sri Lanka, in Maldives, in Pakistan, of course, even in Western countries, even in United States. Across the world, there are branches of the Jamaat. The Jamaat is rooted in religious fundamentalism, religious conservative ideology, and inclines even towards extremism, and it has connections with terrorist entities as well. Terror outfits like Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Lashkar-e-Toiba have had linkages with the Jamaat in different parts of the world. Same with Bangladesh. So when BNP rose to power in 1991 under Khalida Zia's leadership, when the military rule ended and elected government came into power, the BNP depended a little on the support of the Jamaat. Jamaat was the smaller junior party supporting the major party, which is the BNP. We saw the same in 2001 again. In 2001, when BNP came back to power, the Jamaat was on the outside as a junior partner, giving outside support to the BNP government. So as you can guess, Jamaat not only has links with terrorist organizations, it also has direct linkages with Pakistan and the deep state of Pakistan. Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI, is known to have links with the Jamaat. It's known to fund the activities of Jamaat and radical madrasas in Bangladesh. So this is where the challenge lies for India. For India, only Awami League has been favorable. Mujibur Rahman's family, Sheikh Hasina's family and leadership has been favorable. But if BNP comes to power, if Jamaat becomes more active, it has always been problematic for India. Now, this was the traditional politics of Bangladesh until recently. Until 2024, this was the political flux of Bangladesh. But now, big changes have taken place. A lot of changes have taken place. As you all know, Sheikh Hasina was viewed as an authoritarian leader. There was growing anger, discontent against Sheikh Hasina's regime, which led to large scale student protests. Student leaders emerged and they basically threw out Sheikh Hasina's government. So once Sheikh Hasina was thrown out of the country, once her regime was toppled, she has taken shelter in India. The Awami League has now been targeted by the interim government which has been set up. The interim government formed under the leadership of Muhammad Yunus has been equally problematic and controversial. The interim government has essentially enabled the targeting, the political targeting of Awami League and its leaders. Many of them have left the country as well. Some are taking shelter in India, some have fled to other countries. So Awami League is almost out of the equation, and the interim government has announced fresh elections for February 2026. So next year, when elections will take place in Bangladesh, there will be a new type of politics that you will get to see. Because there is no Awami League in the equation. In fact, the interim government has even constituted an international crimes tribunal to investigate and punish the perpetrators of 2024 violence. When Sheikh Hasina used massive force against the protesters and the student activists, hundreds of Bangladeshi youth were killed. Many protesters were killed. So these alleged crimes are now being investigated by a tribunal. So there's no way that Awami League will get a free space to compete and contest in the next elections. The leadership is out of the country. The younger cadres, they don't have the authority and the pull to ensure that they can have a political impact in the next elections. So Awami League has almost been decimated. So this left space for BNP. Bangladesh Nationalist Party under Khalida Zia was expected to fill this political gap, this political vacuum. Correct? When it was a two-party contest and one party is taken out of the equation, the natural assumption is it will benefit the second party. That's what many experts thought as well, that BNP will now make a revival. If not under Khalida Zia, because she is old and she's aging, maybe under her son, the son of Zia-ur Rahman, Tariq Rahman, who is in the United Kingdom. So experts and analysts were expecting Tariq Rahman will come back to Bangladesh to lead the BNP and revive the BNP and capture the political space and win the next elections. But things are getting very interesting. This is not likely to happen. Imagine the second major party is unlikely to capture power because the BNP has not been able to build its political base. Today, the political pull is towards the Jamaat, which has managed to exploit the political vacuum, and it has built up its political base substantially in the last couple of years. Here you can see Shafiur Rahman, the leader of Jamaat-e-Islami. Its activities, its political support base has very rapidly expanded, and they are likely to enter into a partnership with a new political organization known as the NCP, the National Citizen Party, which was set up by the student activist leaders. After they toppled Sheikh Hasina's regime through the 2024 protests, the student activists and the student leaders have founded a new party, the National Citizen Party, which has a lot of political support base amongst the younger population. And they are in an alliance with the Jamaat. So there is a possibility that in the next election, if free and fair elections are not held, if Awami League is not allowed to contest, if Awami League is not given a level playing field, and if BNP is also subdued, the political vacuum might be occupied by the coalition of Jammat and NCP, which could be quite disastrous for India. Given Jammat's inclination towards Pakistan, radical extremist entities, and terrorist organizations, there is a heightened risk for India, for India's security and strategic interests. There is a great risk for religious minorities in Bangladesh, like Hindus and the other minority communities in Bangladesh. So, this is the reason why India is closely watching the political developments. Is that clear? So, you should be aware of these political changes which are taking place in our neighborhood. So, based on this, take up a practice question. Examine the political flux in Bangladesh and its implications on Indian interests. In 2013, UPSC had asked a similar question. In the 2030 mains, following the large protests in Dhaka, right? There was a question in the mains exam on the fundamental split in Bangladeshi society and politics and how it impacts India. That's why I'm saying such topics are very, very relevant for the examination. Next, we have a topic from environment ecology, economy, and related to IR. India, Australia are building a strong partnership in the field of renewable energy. This article gives us some insight into the renewable energy partnership between India and Australia. See, today, Australia's Minister for Climate Change and Energy is visiting India. The Australian Minister, Chris Bowen, the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, will be in New Delhi to meet his Indian counterpart, the Minister for New and Renewable Energy, Mr. Prahalad Joshi. So, in this context, the author has written an article. The author is, by the way, a very well-known individual. Lisa Singh is the first ever woman of Indian origin to be elected to the Australian Parliament. Is that clear? So, Lisa Singh is a reputed member of the Indian community, the Indian diaspora in Australia. So, she's talking about the opportunities for India Australia to collaborate in the field of renewable energy. Because last year, India Australia have set up the Renewable Energy Partnership, which was launched at the G20 summit in Brazil. If you remember, we had covered this topic last year. When Brazil hosted the G20, the leaders of India, Australia, PM Modi and Anthony Albanese, they announced this new partnership, the Renewable Energy Partnership, to bring these two countries together in the field of clean and renewable energy. Now, first, let's understand why this partnership is important. See, India and Australia are major powers in the Indo-Pacific. Correct? And the Indo-Pacific is extremely vulnerable to the impact of extreme weather events, climate change, and global warming. According to data, in the last 40-50 years, on an average, every month, 10 disasters are occurring in the Indo-Pacific region. From Australia to Southeast Asia, to the Indian Ocean islands, to South Asia. Multiple disasters keep occurring every month, from earthquakes to volcanoes to tsunamis to cyclones to floods. So Indian Ocean region and the Indo-Pacific is extremely vulnerable to the impact of climate change and global warming. Extreme weather events will take the toll. There will be significant loss of life, loss to property, infrastructure, and economic loss. So to cope with the impact of this, it is important for Indo-Pacific to shift the focus towards clean, renewable energy, to reduce the emissions in the region, to adapt to the impact of climate change and mitigate the consequences of climate change. That's the reason why renewable energy partnership becomes very important. In this regard, both India and Australia are very responsible powers. India has already declared very ambitious voluntary contributions, nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. India has a stated goal of reaching 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel electricity by 2030. And we have already achieved this target ahead of the deadline, almost 5 years before the deadline. In 2025, India now has an installed electricity capacity, out of which 50% of it is coming from non-fossil sources, from solar, wind, and other clean sources. India has an ambitious goal to step up carbon sequestration and create carbon sinks. India has a very ambitious goal to bring down the carbon emissions intensity and eventually achieve net zero emissions by 2070. Similarly, Australia also has declared very ambitious voluntary targets under the Paris Agreement. By 2035, Australia wants to achieve emissions reduction in the emissions intensity by 62 to 70% as compared to pre-industrial levels. So both India and Australia not only have common interests and common objectives, they have determined a common path to reduce emissions and transition to a clean economy. But however, they have a big challenge. They have a very, very big problem to adopt solar and other clean renewable forms of energy. Because be it for solar, be it for wind and other clean sources of energy, you need new technologies, new components, new materials. And that is where the problem lies. For example, to produce solar modules, solar photovoltaic cells, you need access to rare earth elements. You need access to the global solar production supply chains. And guess who controls and dominates these supply chains? China, which is the mutual rival of both India and Australia, controls over 90% of the refining, extraction, and the processing and supply of rare earth elements. It produces nearly 80% of global solar modules. So, without depending on China's solar industry and the rare earth supply chains, it is nearly impossible for India, Australia to make the transition. This is the problem, the fundamental problem. Now, some of you might argue that, sir, Australia also has great rare earth resources and critical minerals. Correct, you're absolutely right. Australia does have one of the world's largest lithium reserves. Australia even is blessed with nickel and cobalt. It is blessed with plenty of rare earths. But the problem is Australia only has raw materials. It doesn't have the extraction, refining, processing, and capabilities and the downstream supply chain, which is necessary to utilize the resources that you have. So this is where the writers are suggesting that India, Australia have to collaborate. They have to come together because they can't depend on China-controlled supply chains. First of all, they are geopolitical rivals. China is known to leverage its economic advantage for strategic gains. And more importantly, COVID-19 pandemic showed how the supply chain disruption can affect the domestic production in our countries. When China went into a lockdown, shut down its economy and production, the whole supply chains across the world controlled by China, they went for a toss. It completely brought production of essential components in India, Australia, even in the US to a complete stop. So China is clearly having an advantage. Even the United States won't be able to catch up, at least for 20-25 years. Now, recently, if you know, China has placed restrictions on the export of rare earths. China is restricting the export of goods, products, and technologies that consist of rare earths beyond 0.1%. China is trying to retain that monopoly, prevent primarily United States from competing with it. Even the US, despite the best efforts, will need 20 to 25 years to reach this level of domination when it comes to rare earths, battery storage technology, and global solar modules. So this is where the writers believe that India, Australia have the right opportunity under the Renewable Energy Partnership. Under the Renewable Energy Partnership, India can bring its strength. The core strength of India is the human resource, the manpower, the talented manpower, the skills of Indian workers, and merge this with Australia's raw materials. Australia also has plenty of wealth, good regulations. It even has technology. So if India, Australia can come together and make utilization of their strengths that they have, the cross utilization of the strengths they have, they could possibly reduce their dependency on China. The argument is not to compete with China or to replace China. That may never happen. But you can reduce your dependency on China controlled supply chains when it comes to rare earth magnets, rare earth minerals, and solar modules and energy storage solutions. So under the renewable energy partnership, there are 8 pillars which are identified, 8 core areas which are identified by India and Australia. They are going to collaborate in the development of solar photovoltaic technology, development and production of green hydrogen, energy storage, including battery solutions, solar supply chains, circular economy and renewables to focus on recycling, two-way investment, where Indian companies will invest in Australia and vice versa, capacity building through training programs, and other priorities. So, through these 8 core pillars of the partnership, India Australia can reduce their mutual dependency on China controlled supply chains. So, this is the point that we take away from this article. Coming to the next topic, today the paper is dominated by IR related articles. The president of Mongolia is on a very, very important visit to India. Because don't forget where Mongolia is located. Mongolia is located at the intersection of Central Asia and East Asia. And I hope all of you are aware that Mongolia is a neighbor of China. So India's engagement with Mongolia is not just built on economic relations, cultural relations. It is focused on strategic relations as well. See, first of all, India Mongolia share very, very close cultural ties, primarily through Buddhism. Buddhism, which originated in the Indian civilization, in the Indian subcontinent, traveled across East Asia, Central Asia, reached Mongolia as well, and Buddhism remains a major religion in Mongolia even today. So, to mark this spiritual cultural link, India is engaging in soft power diplomacy. We are engaging in soft power diplomacy. India has announced to transport the relics of 2 biggest disciples of Lord Gautam Buddha and to be displayed in Mongolia. These disciples are Tariputra and Maoists. Note down the names of these 2 disciples, 2 important disciples of Lord Gautam Buddha. It's believed that their relics, the body fragments, are available with India. It's very sacred as far as Buddhism is concerned. India is going to transport these relics to Mongolia, put it on display so that the Mongolian Buddhists can pay their respects. And this will further cement the cultural, spiritual ties between India and Mongolia, thus boosting our soft power and creating goodwill and trust for India. Apart from this, India is trying to engage with Mongolia in the defense and security domain, which is a strategy to counter China and Chinese influence. See, Mongolia also has issues with China. They even had a standing border dispute, which later was resolved. But Mongolia doesn't rely or trust China entirely. That is what leads India Mongolia to come together. In fact, we already have close defense relations. Did you know that we already have a military exercise between the 2 countries? Now, I'll give this as an assignment, as a homework for you. Can you identify the name of this joint military exercise between India and Mongolia? Please mention that in the comments below. During the president's visit, India Mongolia have announced new initiatives. India will be deploying a defense attaché at its embassy in Ulaanbaatar, the capital, where the Indian mission is located. To step up the defense engagement, a dedicated defense attaché is being deployed by India to the Indian embassy in Ulaanbaatar. We are going to step up military training between the armed forces and as well as for border security forces of Mongolia. India, which specializes in border security, would be providing capacity building and training program to Mongolian border security forces, along with enhancing our military training program. So Indian armed forces, as well as our border guarding forces, will work closely with Mongolia to train their personnel, to share the best knowledge and expertise. This will further cement our defense, security, and strategic ties. Understood? But the most important development, according to me, the most interesting development is the upcoming Indian project in Mongolia. India has pumped $1.7 billion into a mega project in Mongolia. This happens to be our largest ever line of credit in any country. In one shot, this happens to be the largest line of credit that India has ever invested in a country. We are investing $1.7 billion through a concessional loan. A line of credit is basically a concessional loan with low interest rates and a flexible repayment period. And Indian companies are handling and executing this project. They are helping Mongolia build one of the largest oil refineries. Mongolia has oil reserves and it is looking to tap the reserves with India's help and assistance by building one of the largest oil refineries in Mongolia. You know what Mongolia is doing right now? It was exporting the raw material to either China or to Russia, and then it was importing the refined petroleum products from them. Meaning Mongolia was dependent on China or Russia. It was selling them crude oil and getting it processed and refined in Russia or China and buying it back from them at a higher cost. So, with India's help, Mongolia will become self reliant. It need not send the oil to Russia or China. It can use this massive oil refinery, which will be ready in 3 years by 2028, and it can become self reliant and reduce dependency on Russia and China. And not just that, Mongolia has some precious resources. It has large reserves of coking coal required by the steel industry, which India is looking to procure. It has large reserves of gold, copper, lithium, zinc, and more importantly, it has uranium reserves as well. Now, this is what India is eyeing. We want access to Mongolia's mineral wealth and mineral reserves, and we want to create a mutually beneficial partnership. So, India can extract these resources either through the Vladivostok port in Russia, in eastern Russia, in the Far East region, that is in the Siberia region. Vladivostok is a major port of Russia. There is an Indian consulate as well. India has big investments in the Siberia region, in Vladivostok region. So from here, we can extract the mineral wealth to Indian cities, to Indian ports, or we can even rely on Chinese port, Tianjin, where the recent summit was also held of the SCO, right? So by using the Tianjin port of China, and if China doesn't allow it, maybe through Vladivostok via Russia, and by utilizing the Trans-Siberian Railway network of Russia, we can bring these resources out of Mongolia and use the maritime connection from Vladivostok to Chennai. We are working with Russia to create this maritime link from Vladivostok to Chennai and bring those mineral resources to India. That is why this relationship is so important, for economic reasons, for strategic reasons, for cultural reasons as well. Next, there's an article explaining the crew escape system, which the ISRO is developing for the upcoming Gaganyaan mission. This article is an opportunity for us to understand the working of a crew escape system. We can understand its importance and significance in a human spaceflight program. As you all are aware, Gaganyaan is India's first ever human spaceflight program, right? ISRO is building the required capabilities and technologies to make this dream come true. India's plan is to deploy around 3 astronauts into a low Earth orbit of around 400 kilometers for a few days, conduct few experiments in space, and bring back the astronauts safely. Now, in any human spaceflight program, especially in the first ever human spaceflight program, the main focus is not on the success of the mission. Let the mission fail, but the safety of the astronauts is the number one priority. Unlike other non-human space missions, in a human space flight, the first priority is not the success of the mission. Maybe mission might fail, you never know. But human safety, the safety of the astronauts is the number one priority. So to ensure the safety of the astronauts, because a lot of things can go wrong, right at the launch pad or during the launch sequence, during the ascent phase in the atmosphere, during the orbital phase, and especially during the descent phase. A lot of things can go wrong in a human space flight. And to ensure the safety of the astronauts, you need several redundant systems which will never fail. There should be backups for backups so that at any cost you can recover the astronauts as safely as possible. So, in that regard, crew escape system is one of the most important platforms to ensure the safety of the crew. Because, as I said, during the launch sequence, a lot of things can go wrong where the launch vehicle might fail. India is deploying the human certified launch vehicle LVM 3, which will be strapped with the S-200 solid boosters, one of the most powerful rocket ever developed by ISRO, right? So the human grade launch vehicle 3 strapped with solid boosters, the S-200 boosters, that would be the launch vehicle which would lift off the Gaganyaan mission. Now, a lot of things can go wrong at the launch pad itself when the launch sequence has been initiated, or right during liftoff, during the ascent phase, during the atmospheric phase, during the orbital phase, and eventually during descent, as the crew module makes re-entry into the atmosphere and encounters very, very high temperature. At any stage, things could go wrong. So, to abort the mission, particularly during the launch ascent phase, the crew escape system is very, very critical. So, the crew module can be separated from the launch vehicle. During the ascent phase, to escape the gravitational pull of the Earth, the rocket would be firing at hypersonic speeds, more than 5 times the speed of sound. The human body would already be under severe physiological stress, and even the mechanical components of the rocket, the launch vehicle, would be facing enormous structural load. So, at this critical juncture, if something goes wrong, because this would be monitored in real time by the teams on the ground by using a network of sensors, every single parameter and function of the launch vehicle, safety of the crew, health of the crew is being monitored in real time. If something goes wrong, there would be an automatic escape sequence which initiates the separation of the crew module. And this separation should happen in the shortest time possible. Imagine the solid boosters might explode, or worst case, launch vehicle might fail to ascend. So, in such a scenario, the crew module should be separated from the launch vehicle as soon as possible in the shortest time with minimal damage to the health and safety of the astronauts. So there are two types of crew escape systems which are seen. One is the puller type, the other is the pusher type. If you look at the Falcon 9, the SpaceX rocket used by United States, they use the pusher type, where the escape system is equipped with high-powered liquid engines that generates tremendous thrust very quickly, firing the crew module away from the launch vehicle. But India is using the puller type, where the crew module would be pulled away from the launch vehicle. So when this separation happens, can you imagine the gravitational force being exerted on the body of the astronauts? It will be at least minimum 10 G, 10 times the gravitational pull. So human body can survive this only under specific conditions. Depending on the position of the astronaut, how they are seated, how the pull or the extract will be carried out, how long it will last. Human body can survive 10 G force maybe for few seconds, not more than that. So in few seconds at hypersonic speeds, you have to achieve the separation. That's why the crew module is designed for such a abort. If at all the abort sequence is required, right? The crew module is equipped for that, right? If you see the images of how the astronauts are going to be placed, they will be fitted in a position so that when the crew module is detached and separated through the pull method, the force exerted would be perpendicular to the chest. And they would be seated in a cradle position, how a child sits in a cradle, which is considered to be the safest position to minimize the effect of the G force. So such a system has been successfully developed by ISRO, tested as well in October 2023. But of course, it was just a dummy trial. Many more trials will be conducted before the actual launch of the Gaganyaan mission. There are many upcoming trials of the crew escape system. And once it is separated from the launch vehicle, it will have to descend in a controlled manner, right? For that, a system of parachutes are deployed. Cascading parachutes are deployed one by one to slow down the velocity and ensure a safe and soft splashdown in the sea. So this is the complex technology ISRO is working upon. It has already carried out a successful test, and there will be many more tests coming up. The next article, page 13, related to the conduct of elections. As you all know, Bihar is all slated for the next round of assembly elections in the first and second week of November. And the Election Commission of India is all set to bring the model code of conduct into complete effect. So to ensure that campaigns by political parties and leaders is within the norms of the conduct of election rules and the model code of conduct, Election Commission has notified all the political parties, the national and state level political parties and their leaders, to get every advertisement pre-certified by the Election Commission. Because during elections, you know how political parties and leaders issue a lot of advertisements, be it in television, in radio, in newspapers, and now, of course, even on internet platforms, especially on social media. They even leverage bulk SMSs or SMS blast, right? So our political parties and politicians have become super efficient at marketing, better than even some of the biggest corporate giants of India. When it comes to political advertisements, the problem is, what if there is paid news? What if the media, which has compromised their integrity, which is the norm in case of Indian media, particularly our TV media, our electronic media, what if they are publishing news, which is essentially paid advertisements? What if they are disguising paid ads as news to manipulate the voters, to manipulate their voting choices? So, to ensure the menace of paid news is tackled and to ensure there is accountability on online advertisement on internet platforms, websites, and social media platforms, Election Commission of India has a dedicated cell within it. This is known as the Media Certification and Monitoring Committee. So every political party and leader, when they file their nomination, they have to submit all their advertisements for a pre-certification by the Election Commission. Any ad which goes out in any form of media will have to be pre-certified by the Media Certification and Monitoring Committee. They will even monitor the ads that they push on social media, even if they use influencers, right? Or even if they ensure very clever marketing through indirect methods, everything will have to be reported to the Election Commission, and they have to maintain the silence period, even on social media and the internet. But of course, it is very difficult to enforce when the silence period kicks into effect 48 hours before voting. Any new ads on social media, SMS blast, even this is prohibited by the Election Commission. So to ensure accountability and to enforce the rules in the model code, Election Commission has directed all the parties and leaders to get their advertisements pre-certified. They even have to submit the expenditure they are incurring on all these advertisements, including online advertisements. Next, a big development with regard to India's internal security. As we have discussed in many previous sessions, Naxalism is on the decline. Naxalism is on the verge of its death. The government of India has declared a target for next year, a Naxal Mukt Bharat by 2026. And we are seeing multiple encounters where the top leadership of CPI Maoist have been eliminated. Just a few months ago, the General Secretary of the CPI Maoist, Basavaraju, was eliminated by the security forces, which was one of the biggest wins for India against Naxalism. The very top leader of the Naxal outfit was eliminated. A lot of Naxals are surrendering because there is a surrender and rehabilitation package offered by state governments with support from the central government. And yesterday, the second top leader of the Naxal outfit has also surrendered, along with more than 60 cadres of Maoists. Bhupati, who goes by his original name, Malujulu Venugopal Rao, primarily from the Telangana belt. He has been one of the primary brains behind the CPI Maoist. He's a member of the Central Committee. He was considered as the second in command, and he was expected to take over CPI Maoist as the General Secretary, the next leader of the Maoist movement. So, in the last few months, his wife and other family members had already surrendered, accepting the government's rehabilitation package. Now, finally, Bhupati himself has surrendered with 61 Maoists, and this delivers a very, very big blow to Naxal movement in our country. India has already eliminated many top leaders of the Central Committee and the Politburo Standing Committee. So, essentially, Naxalism is on its last lap. And if everything goes according to plan, in another few months, Naxalism might be a thing of the past. So these were the major articles in today's paper. Now let's take a quick look at the prelim section. On page 2, there's a reference to the South Asian University where a disturbing incident has taken place. A student on the campus of South Asian University has allegedly been raped and sexually abused. So this matter has rocked the South Asian University and triggered national uproar. So you need to understand what is the South Asian University. It can be important for international relations. The South Asian University is set up under the SARC grouping. It's one of the initiative of the SARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. So under the SARC, the idea to set up such a university for South Asian students was proposed by India in the year 2005 when the 13th SARC summit was taking place in Dhaka. It was Prime Minister Manmohan Singh who proposed the establishment of the South Asian University. It was eventually founded in New Delhi and it started operating from 2010. It started admitting students from 2010. It was envisioned as an elite university. It was expected to become a major center of learning where South Asian students from all the member countries from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka could come together to study, focus on research. But, however, this has become a failed experiment, just like the SARC organization itself. You might have heard SARC itself is a big failure. It has not been able to achieve anything major, mainly because of the India-Pakistan tensions and the internal problems of the members. South Asian University also has been seen as a failed project. It doesn't have right infrastructure. For many years, they didn't even have a proper campus. They don't have the right facilities and amenities. It is not attracting the best students and the best talent. So that is something you should know about the South Asian University. Next, the air quality in Delhi has started deteriorating, which is expected from the month of October, November onwards, right? Going forward, especially after Diwali, this trend will continue, particularly towards the winter months when the deadly smog will engulf the Delhi NCR region. So to combat the air pollution in Delhi and the NCR region, there is a dedicated governing body, the CAQM, Commission for Air Quality Management. It has representation from the Delhi government, from the related governments of Punjab, Haryana, and Uttar Pradesh as well. So it is set up through a law passed by the parliament at the directions of the Supreme Court. The Commission for Air Quality Management has some extraordinary powers. As the air quality deteriorates stage by stage, a graded response action plan can be enforced by the Commission for Air Quality Management. It can restrict a lot of economic activities and place a very strict ban on polluting activities depending on the level of air pollution, depending on the air quality index. Right now, the air deterioration in the quality of the air is in the range of 201 to 300. So stage 1 measures have been brought into effect. So under stage 1 of the graded response action plan, the commission can direct the state governments and the local bodies to implement some emergency measures like periodic sweeping of the streets to contain the dust, spraying water on the streets to contain the dust, the particulate matter, and they can even regulate construction activities and even the management of solid waste. Everything can be regulated. In the next stage, they can place bans on diesel generators. They can even limit some construction activity as well. In stage 3, they can restrict certain category of vehicles, which can cause more pollution. And finally, in the worst possible situation, when the air quality is severe plus, very serious emergency measures can be taken where lockdowns can be enforced if required, right? The movement of vehicles can be curbed, entry of old vehicles can be completely banned, power stations can be shut down, and large scale industrial activities can also be completely stopped. So these are the extraordinary powers of the Commission in order to implement the graded response action plan. Next, the Home Ministry has set up the 7th hub of the National Security Guards at Ayodhya. As you know, NSG, the Black Cat Commandos, it is a central armed police force under the Home Ministry. It is a specialist elite force that specializes in counter-terrorist and counter-hijack operations. It is primarily trained and equipped for an urban combat environment for close quarters battle. They are specially trained, specially equipped by drawing the best of the best commandos from the armed forces. The 26/11 Mumbai attack was a big learning lesson because, see, NSG is headquartered on the outskirts of Delhi at Manesar in Haryana. Problem is, NSG doesn't have its own airlift capability. It has to depend on the Indian Air Force. So if, let's say, terror attacks occur in a faraway place, by the time the NSG is mobilized and deployed to the site of the attack, many hours would be lost. So we saw this weakness during the Akshardham attack in Gujarat in early 2000. We saw the same weakness of NSG during 26/11 Mumbai attacks. Many precious hours were lost by the time NSG commandos were airlifted from Manesar. Because first of all, they have to travel from Manesar by road to the Palam airport or the nearby airport in Delhi. Then they have to be airlifted. And then again, they have to reach by road the site of the attack. Many hours would be lost by then. So to increase the response time, or rather to bring down the response time and to ensure very quick reaction, NSG regional hubs were created following the 26/11 Mumbai attacks. So there are NSG hubs in Mumbai, Chennai, Hyderabad, Kolkata, Gandhinagar in Gujarat. So these are the 5 NSG hubs that were created. The 6th NSG hub was recently set up in Jammu to mainly deal with terror incidents in Jammu and Kashmir. And now the 7th NSG hub has come up in Ayodhya, given the heightened risk at Ayodhya. So please make a note of this development. Coming to the last article for today, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh has addressed the UN Troop Contributing Countries Chiefs Conclave, which is being hosted by the Indian Army. Indian Army is hosting a multinational event. We have invited all the major troop contributing countries to the UN peacekeeping forces. The UN peacekeepers, also known as the Blue Helmets, who play a critical role in bringing peace in conflict zones, right? The troop contributing countries have one major grievance, one major complaint, that UN Security Council and the 5 permanent members, they have the full authority over the Blue Helmets, the deployment of the peacekeepers, the overall control over these peacekeeping missions, and ensuring the safety of the soldiers of the peacekeeping missions is entirely the responsibility of the UN Security Council. And this power is entirely wielded by the 5 permanent members who have the veto power. But these P5 countries are not the major troop contributors. They themselves don't contribute troops to peacekeeping missions. Be it US, Russia, UK, France, or China, they are not the major troop contributors for peacekeeping missions. It's usually developing countries, poor countries like Bangladesh, Philippines, Kenya, India, Pakistan, and the others. These are the major troop contributing nations because the global south wants to create a good image for themselves. They want to contribute for maintenance of peace and stability in conflict zones. And they are the largest contributors of troops to the peacekeeping missions. So the demand of the TCC countries is that they should be given a role in the decision making related to peacekeeping missions and the deployment of peacekeeping forces. So to bring about these reforms at the UN, India is hosting the conclave of the chiefs of these countries. Usually, the chiefs of the armed forces are being brought together by the Indian Army, and India is hosting this event. Please remember, India has been one of the biggest contributor to UN peacekeeping forces. Till date, India has deployed 290,000 personnel from the armed forces, from the paramilitary, from the police forces as well. We have deployed an all women contingent units as well, right? From the Korean War to civil wars in Congo, in Sudan, and across the world, Indian peacekeepers have played a pivotal role. Look at the UNIFIL mission in Lebanon, right, which is a hot conflict zone between Israel and Hezbollah. There are hundreds of Indian peacekeepers who are part of the UNIFIL mission. Look at the civil war in Congo, in Sudan. Indian peacekeepers are present. Currently, 5,000 Indian peacekeepers are active. And in total, over the last 7 decades, India has deployed a total of 290,000 peacekeepers. We have suffered the highest casualty as well. 180 plus Indian soldiers have been killed. They have been martyred. They have sacrificed their lives in these peacekeeping missions. That is the reason why India is demanding accountability. To ensure the safety of the peacekeepers, the troop contributing country should have the decision making power. It should not be with the P5 alone. So that is the push that India is giving for reforms as far as peacekeeping operations are concerned. So on this note, I bring my detailed analysis to an end. I hope you've understood all the topics. And if you like the session, do press the like button and don't forget to share your comments. That is it. Thanks for watching.